in that shot?
Yes, you're both in here.
Alright.
Okay.
Alright, hey, welcome to Fireside Tats. I don't know what episode this is, but we're going to keep it kind of short and sweet. I am your host, Jake Meeks. This is Jeff Ensminger. We're at Resurrection Tattoo in Austin, Texas. We're Jeff Tattoos. And we're both kind of beat because he's been tattooing all day and I've been getting tattooed all day. So, but the subject of today's podcast is finishing tattoos, and particularly large multi-session tattoos. And a lot of times, you know, when you're working working on big multi-session tattoos, you can kind of work on them like perpetually, because if some parts age, maybe this part's a year and a half old and this part's brand new, and then you feel the need to go back and work into that old stuff to make it look new again. And so we're going to talk about kind of some ideas on finishing out a tattoo, and in particular the way that Jeff handles it. And we're going to use, I think the easiest thing, since we're going to be clipping in some of the footage of you tattooing me, would just to be kind of use my tattoo as an example. So like when you whenever I lay down on the table today, this tattoo is, we've been about 10 or 11 months working on this tattoo, so nothing's really aged that much, but you look at it, and outside, this is the last sitting, so outside of just looking for smooth blends and, maybe some stuff that maybe healed a little hard or something like that, what is the first thing you're thinking about, or the things that you think about when you look at it? Do you have an order of operations? What am I going to do to finish this thing out?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much have an idea, even from the beginning, like what I'm going to get done each session. And so for this session, the last session, I basically got everything done except for the darkest stuff. So I always save that stuff for the last session.
What's the reason? Why the darkest stuff last?
Well, some of it's because of what you said about aging. Like, I try to break up the tattoo not in sections, like let me get, this part, the hand or the wrist, like, and then like slowly add on like a puzzle where I'm finishing each spot like to completion. I try to make even passes over the whole limb or the whole tattoo. So I break it up not into those sections, but sections as in like sections of color, like I want to get a rough outline in, and then block in the shading, maybe with not necessarily the darkest stuff, but like right in the middle, get that stuff like, so I've got a basic shape to everything,
right?
And then I usually save the black for last, and a lot of that is also because you don't always know what needs to be super dark until you see everything done, except for that.
Yeah.
And it kind of comes from painting techniques of saving all of your shadows for and deep areas for the final effect of the painting.
Yeah. Kind of glazing those things in and trying to get and when painting maybe more of a richness or whatever, or like it's hard to get that same effect in tattooing, obviously, but what about okay, so you're going in, you're kind of blocking in or trying to hit your darkest darks and push those as much as you can, which just by its nature, pushing contrast or pushing your darks is as hard as far as they can go. You're pushing your lights at the exact same time.
Yeah, and a lot of tattoos, my final sitting will be the black and white.
Okay.
Your tattoo just didn't have any white in it.
Yeah.
We went for more of like a graphic, like more traditional approach, even if it's not a traditional tattoo.
Yeah.
But if it were something that were like really realistic, where I wanted to have like heavy textures and I was really looking for that highlight on the texture, then I would also be doing that white at the same time. So you're right. Definitely like pushing things back with the black, and then bringing things forward with either the white, or in your case, using the lightest areas in your skin to bring things forward. So you're maximizing that contrast, which pulls that stuff out for you.
Right. And whether you're actually putting white or light tones in the skin, whenever you push your darks as far as you can, that skin tone naturally looks lighter. Because it has
just because you're
darks
bumping
against it.
that contrast further.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Like if you move everything into the middle, then you're losing the foreground, you're losing the background. So yeah.
And so after pushing that, you obviously went through, and we're going to be cutting in some footage of this, but you went back through a lot of the line work as well. Do you always go back and finish? Do you get your liner out at the end of every tattoo?
Well, for the most part, I mean, it depends on the tattoo, because some tattoos, like, if it's like a real, more of a traditional tattoo, like sometimes I'll just like blast a finished outline and then, black shade it and color it. But generally, if it's fancy in any way, or, more on the realistic or fancy side, then I'm almost always saving my line work for that last session too, like all of the black.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I just do usually a quick outline, with like a 5 liner or something like that. Something I can do really fast. And
at the start of the tattoo?
Like first session. Sometimes even just a gray line.
Yeah.
Just something I can just kind of do it really quick. And then...
but you're not really worried about line weights or how solid the line is or anything
none
like
of
that.
it matters. As long as you're approximately in the right area of where you want the line, what it looks like doesn't matter. Because I know in the end I'm going to be going over all those lines anyway, so it becomes redundant sometimes whenever you do this style of tattoo.
Yeah.
It's like it's better to spend the least amount of time in the front of the tattoo as you can doing that stuff, and then because all that stuff's coming at the end.
Right.
So like we spent all today just doing black, basically,
Yeah.
So it was. I could have done some of that stuff in the beginning, but chances are I would have been going back over it again.
Right.
So
because you were bumping color against it for session after
which is going to knock it down. Right. Like going over black with any color, especially colors that are very opaque, pale, anything with white in it at all.
Yeah.
You can literally cover black with color.
Yeah.
I mean, lots of the cover-ups that I'll do, like I pound white over some of those areas of black just to knock it down.
Knock them back.
You can turn black into 50% of how dark it was just with white.
I think that's an important point because a lot of people think that you can't, black is always going to trump a lighter tone. But you made the point that like the lighter the colors are, the more opaque or and lighter that the colors are that you're bumping against that black, the more of an effect that they have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, like if you use a very transparent color like a straight red, especially like a crimson red, which we talked about that before, are some of the worst tattoo inks. I just eliminated them completely from my palette. But if you were using even just a regular red, like right in the, like I use lipstick red from Eternal, or Fusion, like really red. Yeah, they're the same color. Like I use one of those, but that color is not going to cover over black for anything. Even if it is darker than a color like mint green, the mint green has all the white in it. That color, you could obliterate black in some cases, especially if you do a couple of passes over it and let it heal. Like, you can literally make black almost go away, even fresh black.
Yeah.
It's not just old black for cover-ups. It's like, I mean, I've done that on cover-ups where the tattoo was less than a year old. And I blasted white or like pale colors over it and like almost completely covered it. So a tattoo like yours where we started it like 11 months ago or whatever and we worked on it every few months or every couple of months. Yeah. If I had done all that black in the beginning and then I go over it with some of these like pale mint colors and the water or whatever it was I was using, I could easily have knocked that down like quite a bit. Yeah. And also outline too. If it's an area where it's an outline of black and maybe there's no like black shading against it and you're just coloring up against that edge, I mean, you'll soften up that line quite a bit, you know? So I guess my method is to cut out the redundancies, like to make my tattooing as efficient as possible. I don't want to have to keep on going back over that stuff, like if I don't have to.
That's I think that's the biggest point of it is that for one thing, it really those lines that when you hit them that second time, it cleans them up, it brings them back out, and and whenever you go through and you spend all that time, when you were actually tattooing a little while ago, you made the comment that like you see people spending 2 full sessions on building their line work up or getting all these line weights on the front end of a tattoo before they've even started any color. And it's and now while it's great to go through and model lines and build up line weights, it's just a complete waste of time whenever you're going to pack color all up against it anyways.
It is. It's like you might as well just wait because some people don't go back over the lines, but I think you in most tattoo cases like you should, because it's not as it doesn't look as good as you thought it did once it's all colored in.
Yeah, and especially in larger like multiple sitting tattoos, I think it's always a good idea to come back through with your liner at the end. So mainly it's it's blacks, it's pushing your darkest darks, it's hitting lines, it's pretty straightforward stuff. I mean, anything else that you think of that you're trying to pay attention to? You did add, that's one thing I wanted to bring up, you added some kind of broken reeds in mine, but I thought it was a good point to make that just because you've established this composition and you've worked within this composition for this period of time doesn't mean that you can't make changes to it all the way through. You were drawing until the very end.
Yeah. And I mean, that's another reason that it's cool to save black for the end, is because you don't paint yourself into a corner sometimes, like with that. Like, if I had already done black on some of that stuff, it might have affected what I could have done to add that stuff in, where I kept everything, a little bit lower contrast, like, kind of more muted. Like, when you look at the photos, which you'll probably show, and you can see, like, it just looks like an older, like, not very bold tattoo in the beginning, or before we did what we did today, just because that black makes that much difference, and it I wouldn't have been able to do some of that stuff, like, if I had already done all that black.
Right. And we're the reason for pushing that so hard is that as tattooers we're working at a disadvantage anyways, just simply because we don't have the our darkest darks and the lightest lights available to us, like say an oil painter might have. We can't get we're limited by the skin in a lot of different ways, but that's one of the biggest ways, and so we really have to. I mean, we can't get a true black and we can't get a true white, so pushing that a little farther than you maybe are comfortable doing, going in with straight black when you really want to go in with a medium gray or a purple or a whatever. It sometimes, especially for newer tattooers, I think it's hard to do. We critique portfolios for people a lot, and we were talking, the one thing I find myself doing more than anything whenever I start drawing over the top of these people's tattoos is it's all just like laying in black, because people just work in midtones, and I think it's a real common. It makes sense because I think a lot of times people think that it makes up for poor drawing or poor light source or poor understanding of light, things like that, if they just kind of use medium grays and medium tones to an entire tattoo. But it's just not the case at all. It looks really, if there's one way to make your tattoo look amateurish, it's to use to use grays or to use similar values to the entire thing.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with what you're saying, that I think, like, when you're a younger, less experienced tattooer, sometimes it's scary to just go right in with tons of black because you feel like there's no going back, like, I don't want to make it too dark, that kind of thing. I mean, I was the same way whenever I was newer at tattooing, and I had this idea that it was like, well, I can always make it darker, and like I didn't want it to be too dark from the get-go, when it really was like counterproductive for tattooing to do that. And you brought up a really good point that, like, tattooing is different than a painting. Like, the color doesn't change, once it's on there, and for the most part it stays the same. With a tattoo, you have to deal with the way that person heals and that person's skin tone. There's plenty of colors, like, in the skin that some people's skin tone will just eat up, and you never really know what it's going to look like from person to person. You just got a good guess, but you always get surprises. So it's good to kind of see what stuff looks like before you decide what the final the final dark areas are going to be.
Right.
But,
right. And just so people don't, I just started thinking about this. I know a lot of times with younger tattooers in particular, we talk a lot about the importance of working dark to light in your tattoos. So this doesn't really go against that. We're talking about multiple sittings, and we're talking about pushing your darkest darks at the end. So as far as your process goes within a particular sitting, you typically do still work darker.
I definitely do. If it's a single session tattoo or whatever, like, I get the black done first, like, pretty much, like, for the most part at least, to try to eliminate, like, staining and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which doesn't usually, even staining I don't think usually heals like that. Like, I mean, I guess you can stain a tattoo where it heals, like, where you can see it.
Yeah.
But, if you're careful, it's like you can even go against that rule. It's just... It's something that, like, it takes you, like, some years of tattooing to know when you can do it and when you can't.
Right.
It's like you got to learn the rules before you know when to break them. One thing I was going to say about what you were talking about before with people, like, new tattooers being kind of intimidated about adding too much black, I was just going to say, like, you got to commit. You got to commit to just, like, make that thing dark, like... you can tell when a tattooer doesn't commit to the lines or to the shading or whatever, and I think it's better to commit and maybe stumble a little bit, but it's not like you were too scared to, like,
to make the commitment. I remember when I first started and I would struggle. I started working in areas that were that I wasn't comfortable with, whether it was in a side or in an arm or in something close to an elbow or something, and I would go back to my mentor and just be like, man, I can't get that line in there. I remember him saying, like, man, sometimes you just have to will that fucking thing in. Just will it in there. And I didn't really get it at the time, but commit is basically what it is. Sometimes you just have, and that's that takes a certain amount of, like, I don't know the right term, like, confidence to pull this medium off.
That's what I was gonna say. Is confidence. Like, I know people make, like, the analogy or compare like tattooers to surgeons or whatever, or doctors. They're by no means the same thing, and I'm not trying to say we're doctors, but there is a similarity that as a doctor or a surgeon, you have to have, like, almost like dumb confidence of just what you're doing is right. And tattooing is the same way. Like, I'll tattoo surgeons that talk about that, where they're like, it's like confidence on the point of being, like, cocky in some ways. And I'm not saying you should be cocky as a tattooer, but you have to be confident in everything you do. And sometimes just that confidence of knowing that line is going to be straight and go in, that will make it straight.
It does, for whatever reason. That's true, And just the confidence of, you really just have to know that each mark you make is the right mark. And if you take that approach each time, then it typically will be a pretty decent mark, and it'll be a more natural mark. Yes. Whether it follows the exact line of the stencil or whatever, it'll be a natural movement that makes sense whenever you're confident in the movement you're making.
It's like painting from the shoulder or whatever.
Right.
It's like, it's the same way with tattooing. You don't want to tattoo with your fingers. You want to tattoo like with the whole wrist and the arm.
Yeah. So that's I think we've pretty well covered it all. The biggest thing is pushing that contrast, I think, and I think you'll really see it if you pay attention to the before photos. You'll typically I think you'll think it looks like a finished tattoo, and it did. Pretty much everything was filled. There might have been one or two little spots that actually that nothing was in, but for the most part, it looked like a completely finished tattoo. But then when you see the finished tattoo, I think you'll find the value in going back in for that last sitting. And if you're not a tattooer watching this, if you're someone that, if you're a tattoo collector and you get large pieces, your tattooer isn't trying to rip you off by pushing that last sitting on you. It really is important. You might look at your tattoo and your friends might, and you say, "Oh, that's finished. What else are they going to do?" But trust them because you make a world of difference by just getting in there that last time. Making a game plan, pulling those lines back out, pushing your darks. If there's a way to add something to make the composition a little better, maybe doing that. But
it could be the difference between a good tattoo and a great tattoo.
Right. Yeah, that's well put. So, thanks, guys. Short episode, but that's it. Thanks, Jeff.